You're in the water loop.
Water loop, water loop, water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop. Very excited to have Ramiro Diaz with me today. He is with Waggonner Ball. He is a senior project designer. Ramiro, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to talk to you because of your firm's approach to architecture, if you will, landscape architecture and projects. Really fascinating. You'll do a better job explaining it than I. So could you talk about your firm?
So we started out as a traditional architecture firm, did a little bit of urban planning work, but when Katrina hit New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina, sort of our response to it was to rethink what our role is in this kind of fragile landscape of Louisiana, and have shifted the practice quite a bit towards this living with water approach of design, thinking about every project, whether it's a building or a urban design project or park design project, as part of the landscape and part of the sort of history of the place, as well as the geology and ecology of the place. And so we've been doing a variety of projects around the country now that are embracing water and dealing with resilience and climate change and sea level rise, and sort of helping communities face that future, and maybe looking to the past to learn about their future, and to reimagine, and reconnect people with water.
Yeah, so you guys do a variety of different projects. You'll do buildings, you'll do parks, you'll do other types of landscape work and all that, huh? But this living with water approach really, like you said, came out of Katrina and the realization that you have to be more integrated with water, with nature, be able to be resilient in not distancing yourself from it, but almost allowing it to be part of a project, part of a place.
Yeah, I think it came really in direct response to Katrina and to the sort of Army Corps of Engineers thinking and history of New Orleans. Whether it was, of course, Katrina, we were right after that, we were responding to storm surge threat. We had this incredible failure of our levee system that, we didn't even imagine that as being a possibility. We'd walled off the ocean, we'd walled off the water around us, and forgot that we were a water city. And after Katrina, the response was to fix that levee system, of course, right?
Yeah.
Not to rethink it or to maybe change the shape of it. It would put one back exactly in the place it was, bigger and stronger. But what was not considered was the other threats. It wasn't a holistic kind of response to Katrina. It was just whatever the last disaster was what we responded to. So we realized that our actually bigger threat in New Orleans, or kind of chronic threat, was from rainfall. And these incredible rain events that we have around New Orleans, and the damage from those flood events, which happen regularly, in the long run, are actually maybe more of a threat to the city than these storm surge events, or a different type of threat.
Yeah.
And so this sort of systems approach to urban design and thinking about how you inhabit the city kind of led to this approach. We brought very soon after Katrina, our principal, David Waggonner, went to the Netherlands with Senator Mary Landrieu, who was one of our clients. We had done her house in D.C., and so they were friends, and she brought him to the Netherlands with a delegation of folks from Louisiana. And David made a whole bunch of connections in the Netherlands with thought leaders there, and was really impressed with their approach. Of course, the Americans and the Louisianans went looking at the flood protection. What David realized was that flood protection was more than just walls and dikes and surge barriers. They really think about water at all levels and all scales, whether it's groundwater or rain management, riverine management. The managing every single type of water. There was no line between the Army Corps of Engineers system and the municipal water system. It's all considered there. And in fact, the democracy of the Netherlands was born out of their water boards. So their water boards were people working together to defend their land from the sea and to reclaim the sea. And that was the start of their democracy. So we found that to be really interesting and intriguing, and a different approach to how they thought about water, and also water as a value proposition. Like, people want to be near water. People want to live next to water. And what we realized is that in New Orleans, we'd walled it off. We'd buried it. We'd hidden it. People didn't know there used to be canals all over the city of New Orleans. There used to be more water. And in kind of putting the water underground and hiding it, and we forgot about it. We didn't even realize there was a threat from storm surge. How you manage infrastructure and pay for it long term, and have ownership of it, right? We can't always be reliant on the federal government or some other group to manage our city. So how do we build value in a city that's recovering from a disaster? And so we saw water as a way of kind of reimagining the city, bringing back historic waterways in the city, and living with water, as in living next to it, living with it, embracing the risk from it, recognizing the risk, right? Because water, we have this mindset that we can manage everything and control everything. And at a certain point, you can't. You shouldn't, and that's hubris. And that was the mistake we had made in the past in New Orleans with the flood control system. And our water system, our drainage system was much the same way. I mean, for 100 years, the Surgeon Water Board, told us that we were safe from rain, and that they were going to pump every inch of rain that fell on the city of New Orleans. And it just can't be done. There's not too much rain for that approach to work. So we've been working to kind of re-envision the city in a different way.
How do you do that then? You talked about going to the Netherlands and seeing that it's not just flood protection, it's these other types of projects, and thinking about groundwater, thinking about waterways that should be there. How do you, if it's not just pumps and levees and all that, how do you take a city like New Orleans, or like these cities in the Netherlands that have similar issues? How do you design to let water be part of that city then, in a way that's not going to damage, it's going to prevent the damage, hopefully prevent the flooding, all that kind of thing? Right.
So in New Orleans, it's really easy to do a kind of comparison, because, as I was saying, we put our drainage canals underground in culverts and box culverts, or they're behind walls. They're not part of the city. In the Netherlands, their drainage systems are part of the city. That people live alongside them. All those canals in Amsterdam, they're not just pretty. They're there to manage water. They're there for commerce. There were navigation canals. There were also drainage canals. They use the canals in the Netherlands and the waterways to manage subsidence. Groundwater balance is really important there. And these were all things that we didn't know about or forgot about in our landscape. So if you imagine investing in a place like in New Orleans, for example, the Lafitte Greenway was a project that came from the community. Folks discovered that there was this weird right-of-way in the middle of the city that went from the French Quarter north to the Bayou St. John. And it was a rail corridor. Well, before it was a rail corridor, it was a navigation canal. And the navigation canal connected the back of the French Quarter to the Bayou St. John, which then gave you access to Lake Pontchartrain and a way to have commerce in the city. So that was one of our signature projects in the Greater New Orleans Urban Water Plan, was proposing to bring back that canal as a way to stimulate the economy around it. It was kind of like the High Line in New York. It's an area that was very industrial and under invested in previously. And so imagine this kind of rail corridor and navigation corridor becoming a stormwater feature in the city, where people could kayak from the French Quarter all the way to City Park and Lake Pontchartrain, or ride their bike. And, oh, by the way, it stores 70 acre feet of stormwater that otherwise would have to be pumped out of the city. So that was the type of project that we put forward as a value proposition. Right?
Is that operational now? Like if you can go kayak it or not yet?
No. They did build the greenway,
Okay.
but it was one of the projects we proposed as a demonstration project. There are other projects in the urban water plan that are underway now.
Okay.
But I'm not giving up on that one because it's just too good of an idea. And so we're hoping that with in response to the flooding we've been having in New Orleans downtown, that this green space, this right of way, it's still there. The city controls it. It's a pretty big, long piece of land, and we could do a lot with it. The other project that was in the urban water plan that is going forward and should be breaking ground soon is called the Mirabeau Water Garden, and it's a 25-acre site in Gentilly, which is a neighborhood northeast of the French Quarter, sort of a suburban neighborhood. It was previously a convent, and it had never really been developed. The neighborhood around it was formerly swamp that was reclaimed with the drainage system and turned into suburban scale housing in the 1940s and 50s and 60s. But this site always remained as this kind of big parcel that the nuns had their convent on and had a Montessori school. It flooded during Katrina, and then as they were starting to rebuild, it got hit by lightning and burned. And the sisters were were already pulling back. They weren't going to be operating as a traditional convent anymore. So they were inspired by our work, and they connected with David Wagner, and we worked with them over several years now to give the land to the city, or to they're leasing the land to the city, and we were able to help the city get a hazard mitigation grant from FEMA to develop this site as a stormwater park. So it will take water from the drainage system with a little tiny pump during big rain events and fill up this 25-acre site with stormwater. And when it's not acting as a stormwater detention basin, it will be a park for the community, the neighborhood. And we're also going to reestablish some of the previous landscapes that were there. So it used to be a bottomland hardwood forest. So we're going to plant the bottom of the basin with swamp cypresses and pines and other trees that'll suck up the water after a rain event. And create more habitat for birds and other creatures that otherwise would have been there before we got there.
Yeah, and this is like in the city, right? This is it's so cool to see these kind of things happen. I know there's like a big crazy thing happen in Mexico City, I think, but it's awesome to see a project like this go into a totally urban area and be a community benefit, be a water management resource, and all that stuff. That's great. What's the timeline for that?
So it's a good question. It's ready to go. So it's ready to go out to bid. And I think between the COVID stuff going on, as well as we had a really bad cyber attack on the city of New Orleans back in December, that really stymied a lot of things happening at the city. So hopefully, it's the drawings are at the city and it's all cleared with FEMA now. So hopefully it'll go out soon. But it's when you think of it as a value proposition, though, like this is a $13 million project that's going to do a tremendous amount of flood protection for the community, as well as all the other benefits, the benefits of the natural system that we're creating in this neighborhood, and the trails and the educational features. When you think about the other types of gray infrastructure, the big canal improvements that we've made in the city, this is going to store more water than things that cost many, many times more using traditional, large scale kind of underground drainage canals. With that said, we still need the large underground drainage canals, but this is a additional benefit storage that takes the water out of the system, on the higher ground before it has to go to the pump, which is pretty far away.
Sure. One thing, when Katrina happened, just being at a distance, I'm like, do you rebuild New Orleans? Like if these mega storms are going to keep coming and you've got sea level rise from climate change and, you've got the subsidence issues and, it's like, do you make New Orleans into a Venice? How do you let the water just be there? And so I've just kind of wondered about all of that. And I guess the decision is we're going to go forward and we're going to take more of this embracing water approach.
Yeah, I think so. New Orleans is a little different than other places. But I mean, there's a few areas of Louisiana that have a similar condition, but we're a polder. We're just like the Netherlands, right? We live behind dikes, levees, and we have to manage the water inside of that levee system. So when you build the levee around a community, you end up inducing subsidence because you have to drain within that levee system. Our soils are mucky and soft and organic, and the more you drain, the more it subsides. So that is one of the biggest reasons why we look to the Dutch for this approach of like let's bring these canals back and let's bring back surface water and let's manage our groundwater, because it's a existential threat that we're sinking, we're flooding by rain, and we got to pump everything out. That's the strategy in the past, is pump everything out. We hope to change that. It's very different from other places we're working where you don't yet have that flood protection system, right? So we've been very cautious to tell people don't copy New Orleans, right? We don't, if you're going to build a flood wall, you need to recognize all of the trade-offs and the challenges we've had in Louisiana. So in Norfolk, for example, we are doing a berm around a community, but the berm is very low and it's not promising 100% protection. It's going to reduce flooding. We worked very hard to not only maintain the existing kind of wetlands that would be behind this flood protection system, but we're actually trying to make more, and use those wetlands as the or waterways as the sort of storage basin before the pump, so that the water goes there first, and also just recognize that tidal flooding and sort of the issues in where you are in the Carolinas and Virginia is very different from New Orleans. New Orleans, we are behind a wall now. So sea level rise it's on the other side of the wall, right? So we keep building the wall higher. And we need to protect our wetlands that protect us, the buffer wetlands around us. But it's a very different case than coastal Virginia or coastal Carolinas or Florida, where you have that conjunction of tidal flooding and rain at the same time, where your drainage pipes are full of seawater now because of sea level rise, and there's nowhere for the rain to go. And building a wall around, if you can't even imagine doing a New Orleans approach in places like Charleston or others where, you could do downtown Charleston, but the Johns Island and James Island, all that stuff. There's just, the perimeters are just so big. You can't even imagine. And the cost of the flood system in New Orleans. We're talking about, I think $14 or $15 billion to repair it after Katrina. And then we have the ongoing maintenance every year of, hundreds of millions of dollars of maintenance. We need a tax base to support that.
Sure.
It's an expensive proposition.
As you're in these other areas, or even in New Orleans, then, with climate change coming and the different water impacts it has, intense precipitation, stronger hurricanes, sea level rise. So how does that affect your design, knowing that things are going to be different in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? How do you kind of look down the road?
Well, just by doing that, we look down the road. And you don't know. A lot of times you design to whatever baseline you're trying to reach, and the challenge is constantly pushing the community or the stakeholders to recognize that they need to be thinking further out than just the Army Corps says it's okay to be, we're only going to do 1.5 feet of sea level rise or 3 feet of sea level rise. By the time you do the design drawings, the models have changed and now it's 6 feet. So we've been brutally honest with our graphics and outreach to show what the impacts of 6 feet of sea level rise on Hampton Roads would look like, or 4 feet of sea level. 4.5 feet was the kind of accepted worst case scenario from the regional planning commission and around Norfolk and Hampton and Chesapeake. And when you put that on a map and then show what that does to, if you just take the current base flood elevation, and we're not doing any modeling here, this is just GIS, kind of wizardry. You start to project out what that means for the floodplain. You end up with the entire community being in a 100-year floodplain, where right now there's people, I've never flooded before. Well, you haven't flooded before, but you may in the future. how do we start to prepare for that, and how do we reimagine the cities that we're working in to not only embrace the water's edge or be smarter about how you embrace the water's edge, but think about where you have stronger backbones, like the high ground of the city, and start to think about how you encourage investment in those places. So in Norfolk or Hampton, there's higher ground. We're jealous of their high ground in Louisiana. They're 13 feet above sea level instead of 13 feet below sea level, or whatever it might be. And so, but they tend to, ironically, they tend to be the areas that aren't as developed, right? We always develop to the water's edge. So how do you encourage reinvestment in a maybe start to push the downtown focus a little bit away from the water, or find other ways to invest in a community.
Yeah.
And I'll look for multiple benefits too, right? So there's a road that connects NASA Langley to downtown Hampton. Well, maybe that road becomes some sort of raised causeway that also helps with storm surge. That could be an approach, and that would be a smart investment to making that connection to the Air Force Base, which is the big job center there, and to downtown, and then you get the benefit of protecting the community behind it. So looking for those multiple benefits and not just singular one use kind of we're going to build all around a community.
Sure. As your work kind of becomes more known, that your firm's work, and as communities are looking more and more at doing more with water, especially these coastal kind of communities, are you just finding more people knocking on your door and trying to get ideas for how they can take similar approaches?
Yeah. I think there's a lot more. When we started this road 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
15 years ago. It was like we were proselytizing and educating, and trying to, go out there and say, hey, we need to do this differently. Now I feel like it's everybody's now finding that we need to think about resilience in a different way. And there's a lot more projects out there around the country, around the world, that recognize this resilience approach. And I think the 100 RC, the 100 Resilient City, Rockefeller Foundation thing was useful in that, because there were 101 cities that had to go through this resilience review process around the world. I think the federal government has been doing more. FEMA is now starting to recognize that they need to do proactive measures instead of reactive. The hazard mitigation funding type projects could be a better way to spend money than to just chase after the flood afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And HUD, the National Disaster Resilience Grant competition that the Obama administration started. Those projects are now coming into fruition, right? So the one in Norfolk and New Orleans, had Louisiana, a bunch of different places we've been working. Bridgeport, Connecticut. We helped those communities craft that competition entry to then get the federal money. And now we're continuing to work with them to develop those plans.
When you do these type of projects, there's like a lot of stakeholders involved, right? Different levels of government, different community groups, landowners, yada, yada, yada. How does that go? How's that process work? And
I have to be honest, we're a little bit anarchic with that. This comes out of our experience with Katrina. So the other part of the story, not only did David go to the Netherlands, but he brought the Dutch back. So we brought all these Dutch collaborators to New Orleans to work with us on what was called the Dutch Dialogues. It was some of the first money that was spent on planning in New Orleans, and it was funded by the American Planning Association as well as the Royal Dutch Embassy. So so the Dutch paid for it, along with a bunch of locals and our firm. But we brought together all of these Dutch and American planners and engineers and scientists and architects and landscape architects, as well as local stakeholders that, like Surgeon Water Board and others, to work together and to charrette, to work in a room, draw. It was messy. There was a lot of chaotic stuff going on. And for 2 or 3 days, we did this pressure cooker approach of getting all these people in a room together and just reimagining New Orleans, and had great results. And visionary ideas came out of it that really upset the status quo. Right. So it was this, why can't you do that? I mean, the Dutch the whole time are like, where's the water? Why can't I go to the water? Why have you hidden all your water? So that Dutch dialogues resulted in the funding later for the urban water plan, which then has resulted in these projects, and now the NDRC. But that approach that we kind of organically came about through the Dutch dialogues, we have been doing on every project. These kind of charrettes that can be dangerous a little bit, because you get a bunch of people in a room together, and you never know what's going to come out of it, and it makes the client very nervous. But it works, and we usually get really great results in a very short period of time with people that are very talented come to these, and we just draw and get messy. We measure progress and how much tracing paper we go through and how messy our hands get. But it's a great way to bring people in. So we bring in the stakeholders that the city and the local leaders. We work with them to develop that list of people, people from different agencies, and then we open it up to the community selectively. And then we usually have a presentation at the end and something with the community and get them engaged. But because it's a little bit of a messy process, you need to make sure that there's a little bit of separation from, this is usually community leaders that we bring in, or people that, that are really involved in the neighborhood, and then we do a more public process later. But getting everybody at the table and getting everybody's noses pointed at the right direction, that's like a Dutch term, and also make sure everybody recognizes they're in the same boat, right? We're all working together, and the folks that have been comfortable with their traditional civil engineering approach for the last 50 years, getting them to work with these naive Dutch landscape architects that are like, well, why can't you do that? Has been really successful. Break things up. So that's been a lot of fun, and it's been successful. Most cases, and presenting a vision, I think, just making really nice drawings that get people excited about what they can read into, how they want the space to be. Well,
that was the drawing of the illustration of the Mirabeau Water Garden there in New Orleans is one of the things that first caught my attention and led me to kind of reach out to you guys. It's like seeing those illustrations. I'm like, yes, that's what I want in my community. Do you think on that community benefits thing? I mean, how much do people really value that side, aside from the stormwater management and all that kind of thing, just like bringing nature back into these urban areas and the beauty and the place to go exercise and whatever it might be. I mean, that's one of the things that excites me so much.
Yeah. It's not a hard sell.
Yeah. Okay.
No, not at all. Cool. I mean, I think that's where, people get most excited about I want a boardwalk, I want a trail. But if we can say this is a flood management project, this is a coastal restoration project, or this is and oh, by the way, we're getting, this other benefit that's going to, bring more fish and more birds. And, we're doing a project in City Park in New Orleans, which is huge. It's 1,300 acres. And we convinced them to allow us to introduce floodwater into the park from sort of the neighborhoods around it. So it's going to help adjacent neighborhoods. But the result of this FEMA project, which is, FEMA is very narrowly focused on disaster or flood reduction. We're going to have to do some ecological improvements to this lake system because we're going to be introducing floodwater into it. So we have to clean it. We have to purify it. The lakes all need to be dredged because they've silted in over the years. And we were going to create shelves that increase water storage first, right? So we'll take this, kind of lake that has edges like this and start to lay out the edges and create wetland banks and terraces. And those are going to be for stormwater benefit, right? Well, but actually we're going to be creating tons of new habitat for fish and birds, and it's going to beautify the lagoons. It's going to provide opportunities for people to kayak through these lagoons, and we're going to get rid of all the places where it's been choked down and there's just a little tiny culvert to connect these lakes. Well, we're going to open those up and create a way for you to kayak through the whole park. And it's a lot easier to get people to get excited about the kayaking part than the stormwater part. But in New Orleans, everybody recognizes we flood all the time, and everyone's upset about that. So it's a nice mix. The co-benefits, the multiple benefits. It's not a hard sell, and the more we do this work, the more we recognize that heat, urban heat island, and the challenges related to that, urban health, but just public health related to, of course, now with COVID and being able to go outside is, City Park has never been busier in New Orleans. But shade and water quality and air quality and all these things go hand in hand with tree canopy, and the tree canopy helps with our groundwater and it helps with our flooding, and so all of these things work together. It's not just water.
Yeah,
we're looking at all of these factors. Yeah,
good stuff. Well, I actually live about a block from a 17-acre stormwater area that is exactly like you described. It has a couple different terraces. We've had pounding rains the past couple days. I walked over there this morning because I want to see how high up the water had come on those different areas. But it's also got little half-mile or so trail through there, people walking, biking, but it manages all the water in the neighborhood. So it's good stuff. Well, I can't wait to get down to New Orleans at some point and check out some of these spots, and hopefully some of the projects have come along further. I'll look to connect with you and get out there and check it out. But Ramiro, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Sure, of course, it was great. Thank you for inviting me.
You're in the water loop.